Welcome to ClueCon Weekly. Join us every Wednesday to learn about the latest cutting-edge developments in the real-time communications industry. ClueCon Weekly is brought to you by FreeSwitch Solutions. Get support and professional services directly from the creators of the FreeSwitch open source project, solving your issues in the most efficient, stable, and scalable way possible. Get the FreeSwitch advantage. Visit freeswitch.com. Also brought to you by ClueCon, the premier technology conference for developers by developers. Join us every summer in Chicago. ClueCon kicks off on Monday with our annual hackathon, The Coder Games, followed by 3 days of technology-rich presentations discussing telecom, WebRTC, and IoT from developers around the world. To learn more, visit ClueCon.com or call 877-74-CLUE.
And welcome to ClueCon Weekly. Today is the 17th of April. This week we got David Duffett going to be joining us from Telespeak. David's going to be talking about Geek Speak. It seems he has this odd notion that developers like to get paid well, and he has some things he thinks can help us. So it should be really interesting, and I want to know all about it because I like to get paid. I hope you guys do too. First, before we get to that, let's jump over and talk to Miss Abby about the news. Abby, how are you doing today?
I am doing great today. Thank you for asking. Hello, everybody, and thank you, as always, for joining us today on ClueCon Weekly. So I have very short announcements today so that we can get right into David's presentation. A quick thank you to Yealink for sponsoring ClueCon this year. It's our 15th anniversary, and our sponsors help make our conference extra special. So thank you so much to Yealink for helping us out with our conference. And if you are interested in sponsoring ClueCon this year, you can email Sharon@freeswitch.com. So in celebration of our 15th anniversary, like I mentioned earlier, for a limited time, you can register for the lowest price that we've had in over a decade at $7.99. So I definitely recommend taking advantage of that special low pricing. And if you're interested in trying out SignalWire, you can get a $50 credit using the code CCWeekly19 in all caps at signalwire.com. And that is all the announcements I have for today. We might talk about ClueCon a little bit later. And if you have any questions at all for David, let us know in the Slack channel, the YouTube channel, and we will ask him those questions live so that he can answer them for you right here on ClueCon Weekly. All right, that's all the announcements I have for today. Back to you guys.
All right, thank you very much, Miss Abby. Let's jump over Mike. Mike, what do you guys got for Community Corner for us today?
Well, this week we have a question for Mike Jarris, and the question is from Robert Mundodowski, I think. I said that right. Sampling video from a conference. I wanted to check if there are any new modules for sampling video from a conference. In other words, getting images from a video conference. So Mike, can we do that? What's the deal with that?
We absolutely can, and you don't need any additional modules to do it. So there's a bunch of functionality in conference in order to capture video and things like that. The conference record API, the conference auto record functions, things like that. And those can record video files, but also built natively into the conference MUX, you can take video snapshots. Like of the screen we're looking at right now, the two of us overlapping with the background and all that. You can take a image snapshot of that with a single API command. It's part of the conference API command. It's write. What exactly is it? It's write vid-write-png space file name. So conference, the conference name, vid-write-png with dashes in the file name. We'll take and write the exact image we're looking at right now to a PNG file. That is built right into Conference, lets you capture the entire screen.
So Mike, what should we not do? Because I know people have tried in the past using like mod VLC and stuff like that.
What should we not do? Generally, I tell people mod VLC is not the preferred method. You should only use it if you absolutely have to. Mod AV is the one that has the best functionality right now and is the best supported and just generally works. So for basically anything video codec or video format, mod AV is generally the answer for you. Back in the day, we had something called mod FSV that was kind of our own static header based video encapsulation. It still works ish, but it's pretty limited, and mod AV has a ton of capabilities. I use MP4s for almost everything at this point.
The compression. Okay.
Yeah, just because it's the best.
Thank you, Mike.
Yep, no problem.
Answers from the experts. So today we have David Duffett. So,
hey there, Mike.
David, you are an internationally famous character.
I'm not sure whether I'd go quite that far, Michael.
I'll tell you, when I go to all the conferences and stuff, it's one of the faces. I'm always like, oh,
So I'm sorry, I missed that little bit. I think I had a little bit of a glitch here.
Did we lose Michael? I think
Yeah,
Michael's internet connection.
Michael's kind of gone static on the screen here.
Uh-oh. Well, let's see.
no, I'm here.
Oh, you're frozen. Now he's back.
So,
Okay.
David, what's new with you today?
Okay. So, as you all probably know, I'm not with Sangoma or Digium anymore. They are kind of changing the way they interact with the community. And so I've come out and started my own project about geek speaking. I'm still excited for Asterisk, and I'm still very interested in Astricon. And the last I heard, they're just homing in on some dates. So I'll be keeping a watch out for Astricon this year. But of course, I'm very, very excited about participating in ClueCon this year as well. But your 15th one in Chicago, and I guess we'll probably talk about that in a bit more detail a little bit later. But I will be coming along to talk about my latest.
We can't
project.
wait to see you there. That's for sure.
Yeah, it's always a great time, and I particularly like the kind of family feel of it, and also the fact that things like the Coda games are just very, very inclusive, because there are, of course, people that go to ClueCon who don't write code. There's a few of them, and even they get to participate in the Monday hackathon by getting involved in building things that might not involve code. And so I think it's a great time there.
Well, that's awesome. So tell us more about GeekSpeak.
Yes, okay. So I'm actually working on a book called Let the Geek Speak. It's because I want nerds to be heard. I think for too long nerds haven't been heard, and it's time that they were. I've been involved in technical companies, telecoms companies mainly, for the best part of 30 years now. And it always struck me as just kind of unfair that the guys who were in the back room making the product and supporting the product weren't getting paid or recognised quite as well as the guys in the front of the shop selling the stuff. And that just struck me as unfair. And it wasn't because I thought that the salespeople should get paid less or get recognised less. It was that I thought the technical people should be better recognised and better paid, and just better looked after in general. I think we could get an amen on that, couldn't we?
Yeah, absolutely. The world's changing at such a fast pace that I think one of the things we're starting to see is those tables are starting to substantially turn. Like the engineers are really starting to get on the high end of the pay scales. More than other professionals like doctors and lawyers.
Well, that is what I want to assist, and of course, in my time in these technical companies, a good 20 plus years of that has been involved in both giving speeches at conferences and organising conferences as well. And I've come across that fairly common concept of a geek who's excellent technically and knows exactly what he's about technically, but maybe can't actually communicate that to other people in the best possible way?
Well, that's really the crux of the problem, isn't it? Is a lot of these guys that are ultra intelligent, they don't have excellent communication skills.
Indeed, and that is the problem that I'm looking to address. Now, of course, there are some technical people that would never ever want to have those skills. That they want to sit in the back of the room in the darkened place and read hex traces and stuff like that. But there are others that want to come out and want to get in front of people and just maybe lack the confidence or the communication skills. And I, over the years, have boiled down great communication skills into what I now call 7 power presenting protocols for nerds.
And what are the 7? This is great. I love this. What are the 7?
Well, but before we get into what they actually are, let's just talk about the advantages there are for geeks that can speak, for nerds that get heard. There's pay rises, there's promotions, there's that new job in a new company. There could be the possibility of giving a presentation to funding people, venture capitalists, or if you're selling your company, or maybe even going for an initial public offering. So if you're a geek that can speak, and I'm sure we already know some of the geeks that can speak out there is a lot of advantages. And what I'm trying to do is bring those advantages to more geeks.
I'm sure a book could do that. That's for sure. The most important thing is to be very vocal and be heard, right?
Yeah, indeed. So what I've done is boil it down to 7 protocols, because one of the things that nerds are really good at is getting into detail and actually following processes and procedures in certain areas of life that maybe some other people wouldn't. They might take it a little bit more on the fly. And so these 7 power presenting protocols, if they're followed, guarantee success in presentations. And I'll go through the 7 protocols first with just an overview. But then, Michael, if you just prepare a couple of contributions for me. I want you to tell me about presentations you've seen that don't hit the spot. Somehow they weren't quite right. And what we'll do is we'll then diagnose them by protocol and how we could fix them. How does that sound?
I'll tell you what, why don't we use one of mine, right? So if we look at my ClueCon presentation from last year, right? It was about Redis, OpenSIPs, and FreeSwitch, right? And at the end of the conference, everyone was relatively silent, right? Or at the end of the speech, everyone was relatively silent, right? And so I was all dismayed about it because I was like, oh, people weren't paying attention and that type of stuff. And then, like maybe a week or two ago, I was looking to it online and it's got like, a couple hundred views.
Good news. Good news indeed. Yeah, I mean, actually, the ending of a presentation is just about as important as the start of a presentation. I'll tell you what, shall we jump through the 7 protocols and then we'll come back and we'll talk about beginnings and endings, because those are very crucial pieces.
That sounds good, but I think in the end, like you're talking about critiquing video, let's do that. That'd be fun.
Okay, so let's just jump through the 7 protocols first. So the first protocol, and they all handily begin with a P. There's 7 Ps. The first one is the purpose of the presentation. All too often people kind of jump into preparing a presentation without really weighing up what the purpose of that presentation is. And sometimes they'll run off in their own direction with a purpose without talking to the other people that need to be involved. And so I've labelled the 3 parties involved as the person who wanted you to do the presentation in the first place. We'll call them the sponsor. So in the case of ClueCon, maybe it's the organisers of the ClueCon that are the sponsor of the presentation. And I don't mean sponsor in a financial way. I mean sponsoring that they asked for that presentation to take place. Then there's the audience, the people that are going to be on the receiving end of the presentation. And then there's you, the presenter. So what I've done is I've identified this thing called a learning contract, where we tie all three groups into an outcome that we're all looking for. And the outcome is defined in the traditional way of aims and objectives. So an overall aim for the presentation and a set of objectives. And the idea is that before you do a word of the presenting, before you get into your presentation, you make sure that all three parties are signed up to that outcome. Now, that could be by circulating a document beforehand, or it could be that you can only talk to the sponsor beforehand and you can't talk to the audience. So in that case, when you get in front of the audience, you would say, right, here's my plans for this presentation. Here's the objectives we're going to achieve. How does that sound? And you'll get their buy-in. Because as you know, there's that very special equation, involvement equals commitment. So if you can get people involved and just agreeing the objectives, then they'll be a bit more committed to the outcome. So that's the purpose in overview. We get the purpose of the presentation mapped out, and we sign up all the stakeholders, if you like, the sponsor, the presenter, and the audience. How's that sounding so far, Mike?
Sounds great.
Okay, all right. So that's obviously there's more detail in there, and in the book, I actually step through the exact steps to do and the way to frame those objectives. As I'm sure you know, objectives need to be things that you can watch or listen to being achieved. So a good example of an objective might be by the end of the presentation, the participants will be able to identify 5 advantages of using FreeSwitch over using a competitive product or something like that. In other words, you should be able to watch or listen to people achieve the objectives. Anyway, that's the purpose. So then we go on to the plan. And this is another area where people suffer a little bit. People tend to think that a presentation is a set of PowerPoint slides that they're going to talk against. And really, the PowerPoint slides or the Prezi slides or whatever slides or the keynote slides, whatever slides you're going to use, are not the presentation. They're just a very small part of it. They're a visual aid to help with the presentation. And so in planning, what I talk about is ways of mapping out a great presentation. And I give people 3 different options. 2 of them are what I would call a top-down approach, where you start off with a title of a presentation, you break it down into a number of headings, and then you break the headings down into a number of points below them. That's what one might call a top-down. However, there are some disadvantages with a top-down presentation or top-down planning method, and that is you could miss some bits out. As you're kind of coming down in the tree, if you like, you could potentially miss something that you wanted to say. And so another way that I throw in is a little bit more of a random way, what I might call a bottom-up methodology. And what you do there is you just get some Post-its, you know the kind of things, and you just scribble down individual things that you want to cover on individual Post-its. So you could end up with 50 or 60 Post-its all over your desk with individual ideas on them. Are you with me so far, Michael?
Absolutely.
Good. Just checking in.
This is like almost like a Toastmasters concept, right?
Yeah, I mean, this is kind of like Presentation Skills 101. However, it's done in a way that geeks will relate to better and hopefully get more from. So once you've got all those Post-its all mapped out, all laid out over your desk, a random collection of 50, 60, however many Post-its, what you do is you then group them into logical groups. You'll see that they fall into groups. You put the groups together and they become your headings. So the heading for a particular group of Post-its. And so in that way, you've brainstormed every single thing you want to cover and you've popped them into groups. So you've worked from the bottom up, if you like. That is the planning stage, because every presentation needs a structure. If they don't have a structure, they're a lot harder to follow and people find difficulty in actually extracting value from them.
So you would think a lot of tech people would have structure because it's the very nature of the business. And so a lot of the speakers don't have structure in their presentations?
Well, some do and some don't. And I'm just trying to be, because some of these are basic things and some of them are more advanced things. But in the case of the structure, you find some people are used to using structure in their programming. For instance, they might use a structured programming methodology. They come to a presentation and, you know, their presentation looks like jelly against the structures that they might use in other places. So structure is absolutely critical.
So Just what about adding animals to the presentation? Is that a good presentation?
Adding animals.
Like little puppies and kittens.
Well, I guess it depends on who you're presenting to and whether they're relevant for presentation. But thank you for that random contribution, Mike. So, just when we're planning a presentation, we need to take into consideration the keys to putting things into people's memories, and there are 5 keys to putting things into people's memories. If your aim through the presentation is to get people remembering things, there are 5. Count them. 5. Hold on. Yeah. No, that's 4. 5. My camera's all over the place. 5 different ways of doing that. And so that will affect the way you structure your presentation. The first 2 are firsts and lasts. You know how you remember your first day in a job and your last day in a job, but you don't necessarily remember the days in between. You remember the beginning of the movie and the end of the movie, but you don't necessarily remember the middle of the movie. First and last, or the technical terms, primacy and recency, very, very important in the art of presentations.
That's interesting.
Yeah, so when we're talking about people's attention spans, we might call the beginning and the ending of your presentation your prime time. So as you're planning a presentation, you want to use that prime time to get the key information in. I mean, as you know, when you watch a news broadcast, they always give you the headlines at the beginning, then they kind of pad out the program with details about it, and then they finish off with a summary, don't they, the headlines. So the beginning and the ending of the presentation are very, very important. But there's more than just the beginning and ending. There's also first, last, links to what you already know. So that's the power of the analogy. If somebody can already understand thing A, and you can relate the new thing to thing A, then you're going to help them understand it better. And an example of that, just one that comes to mind, is the concept of Ohm's law and resistance against current flowing in a circuit. And one of the analogies that one can use is thinking about a garden hose pipe, you know, doing water over the garden and putting your foot on the hose pipe to restrict the flow of the water. That would be an analogy, a link to what somebody already knows. Ken, have you noticed that Mike disappeared?
Yes, I did. That's why we only see you now.
I'm actually still here. I'm here from an audio perspective.
All right, you're on audio. Okay, so we were just talking about the keys to memory. We got first, we got last, we've got links to what people already know. Repetition is also a way of getting things into people's memory. I always like to say that repetition is the mother of learning. However, it is also the distant cousin of boredom, so we try not to go too far down that road. And the last category in getting things into people's memory is to make things outstanding. So we've got firsts, lasts, links to what we already know, repetition, and then outstanding. If something is truly outstanding in the middle of a presentation, for instance, I'll give you an example. Do you remember last ClueCon when one of the guys did a dangerous demo of a Raspberry Pi Zero running free switch wrapped in bubble wrap, all taped up, and then it got thrown around the room? Do you remember that one?
Mark Cranes.
Yeah, exactly. That was outstanding. We all remember Mark Cranes did that amazing demo and the way it got kicked around and somebody drop kicked it at the back of the room because it was outstanding. So when we're building our presentation, we'll try to think about those 5 categories, first, last, links, repetitions, and outstanding, in order to put a presentation together in the way that people will remember it best.
Cool.
So that's the first 2 protocols, the purpose and the plan. Then, of course, we've got to prepare. And as you know, with preparing, people, especially geeks, seem to take great pride in not preparing for a presentation. They love swapping stories about, oh yeah, I did my presentation on the plane on the way over here, or the night before, or the minute before, or the 2 seconds before I was about to go live on stage. Do you know the sort of thing I mean?
Yeah. I've been in that situation more than once.
Yeah, and that's really not gonna help, is it? I mean, imagine, Mike. I'm sure this would never happen to you, but imagine if you had to go to court because you'd been accused of something that you didn't really do, but the stakes were very high, and you were possibly going to go away to a penitentiary somewhere, and you hired an attorney, and the attorney said, "You know what, Mike? I'm going to wing it. I'm not going to bother preparing. I'll just wing it because I do my best work when I wing it." How confident would you feel about that?
Unfortunately, I think that happens to a lot of people in America.
You would want,
but I would not be very happy.
you would want them to prepare. And that preparation is not just practicing. That's another protocol. I'm going to come on to practicing in a minute. But preparation, for instance, knowing the room that you're going to deliver the presentation in. You might not be able to fly there in advance, but you can surely get some data about it, make sure it can be blacked out, make sure that if an audio system is required, one is going to be there. The other visual aids that you're going to need are going to be there, whether there's going to be a flip chart, all these kind of things. Preparation is key. And the reason why preparation is key, and by the way, I'm sure you've heard of the FBI 6Ps, haven't you?
Oh, what is that?
The FBI 6Ps, and I'm going to give you the clean version, is proper planning prevents particularly poor performance.
I would think an intelligence agency would believe that.
Yeah, that's the cleaned up version. Anyway, preparation is key. And something else that we say in the world of presenting is failure to prepare is to prepare for failure. And the thing is, I think you and I know this very well, and anybody that's presented,
which is essentially the same thing, right? But
yeah,
it's a glass half full issue, right?
Yeah, but the difficulty is when you're the person on stage, it doesn't matter why things go wrong. So there could be a power outage, there could be a problem with the audio system, there could be a problem with the compatibility between your laptop and the projector. There could be a world of different things, and they might not be your fault. However, the person that looks like a monkey on the stage is you, the presenter. So really, in the preparation phase, you've got to cover all the bases and make sure that everything that can contribute to the well-being of your presentation, from the joining instructions and the documentation people get ahead of time to all of the post-event stuff, is all mapped out properly. Because as you're walking in your audience members' shoes, you want them to have the absolute best experience.
Well, from a planning perspective, right? From a planning perspective, the conferences address this. They always have like the interop period where you go in a day before and you check, to make sure everything happens.
Some of them do. The best conferences do.
Yeah, and so one of the things that happens is you can go in and do that, and this happened to me last year. You can go in and do it, and everything will work, and then you get up there on the stage and it doesn't.
Indeed,
and that's the worst, because what happens in that case is it offsets the speaker too, because you get nervous. And it affects the presentation.
Yes, now I'm glad you raised the subject of nerves, because I would say that if you go through the preparation protocol and the next one we're going to discuss, the practice protocol, that will remove most of the nerves, but not all of them, because of course a certain degree of nerves just come from the fact that you're standing in front of a large group of people, and that, we have to address that. But a lot of the nerves come from feeling ill prepared to get in front of the people, feeling that you're not quite up to it, or that something's going to go wrong, or that you're a bit unsure of something. So proper preparation that prevents particularly poor performance is a good thing, but also practicing. And practicing, when a lot of geeks think about practicing a presentation, their mind immediately wanders to something else and they don't bother doing it. And that's a terrible thing, because as you know, geeks are all about alpha trialing their software, if it's software they're working on, or their hardware projects. They're all about beta trialing. They're all about trying things out ahead of time. So why is it that they don't practice their presentations?
Because they're too busy staring at code.
That's right. But if it's important enough to present about it, it's important enough to practice it. And so let's pretend we've got a good geek, and a good geek thinks, no, I do need to practice my presentation. I do need to put a bit of time into it. What they're likely to do is open up their PowerPoint presentation or their keynote presentation or their Prezi presentation. And what they'll do is they'll look at each slide, and this will be the extent of their practice. They'll look at the slide and go, in their mind, they'll go, yeah, I'll probably say this, this, and this while that slide is on the screen. That's usually the extent of a geek's preparation. And doing that, especially, just doing it in your head, is just not good enough. We need to actually go through the presentation start to finish, including the introduction, the grabbing of people's attention at the beginning. And we need to do it out loud, maybe into our smartphone so we can record it, maybe into a video recorder, maybe to a group of friends. But we really need to take home the concept of alpha trialing and beta trialing our presentation if we want to do the best possible job.
That's a great idea. It really is. I got to tell you, the first time that I got on ClueCon Weekly, just sitting in front of a camera, I was so nervous that I would essentially, my stomach would churn. And that happened for the first couple of weeks, and then after that, you kind of get used to it. The nerves disappear, but the nerves can sink you for sure.
Yeah. So now there's an interesting thing. You're quite right. Some people will actually get so good that they begin seeing presenting as a very joyful thing and not as something to be scared of. I actually ran a presentation skills class in the USA a few years ago, and one of the ladies who was on the class wrote that she came out of the class rather than fearing presentations, actually enjoying doing them and looking forward to doing them. And of course, if you're looking forward to doing something, you're much more likely to do a better job. Anyway, back to practicing. It is the beginning and ending, just like I was saying, the prime time of your presentation that you want to practice. You need to practice the beginning more than any other part of your presentation, because as you've just said, Mike, the chances are you may be a little bit nervous at the beginning. But if you've practiced it so much, and remember this, Mike, that amateurs practice until they get it right, but professionals practice until they just can't get it wrong. If you've practiced that much, you're going to come out of the gate and go straight into the beginning of your presentation that you've practiced so well, and your nerves, if you have any nerves, your nerves will be put to one side because you'll go on autopilot because you've practiced the beginning so well.
That's a great concept. It really is. It's a really great concept.
I think it's very, very useful for people to practice the beginning and the ending of their presentation. And actually, just while we're talking about endings, what can you think of any particularly memorable or unmemorable endings to presentations that you've seen?
Well, I think some of the micro presentations are always the most entertaining, right? So like the dangerous demos, like you were talking about Mark Crane and his, ball, right? But you had I remember one time there was one of those little tiny helicopters that started flying over the audience at Camellia World. And so that kind of, you got to worry about things like that.
Yeah, when there's potential physical danger involved, then yeah, that spices things up a bit. all too often, very sadly, you watch a geek presentation and they get to the end of the presentation. Here's the absolute worst. You don't see this all the time, but the absolute worst ending is they get to the end of the presentation and go, yeah, and that's it. Yeah, that's all I have to say. That's just such a lame ending of a presentation. The next worst presentation is, okay, that's everything I got to say. Has anybody got any questions? And then they open it up for questions. And what happens is that people ask questions, if there are any, they die down, and then the presentation kind of fizzles out to nothing. And you get a little half-hearted round of applause when all the questions have died and nobody's interested anymore. Do you know the kind of thing I mean?
Yeah, I think most people end presentations asking about questions.
Yes, so here's just one of the tips that's in the book. And that is, when you come to the end of the presentation, you should always end strong. You should finish well on a presentation. And so, yes, of course, you want people to have an opportunity to ask questions. And so, just as an example, one might say, okay, I'm about to summarize, but before I summarize, has anybody got any questions? Or what questions do you have before I summarize? And then you let people ask their questions, and when they finish asking the questions, you go, thank you for all those questions. Now let's summarize. In other words, you're taking back control of the presentation yourself, and you're going to bring it to a hard end, and everybody will know when it's finished, and they'll give you a proper round of applause and say, thank you very much for that very concise and well summarized presentation. It's all about bringing back control rather than...
That's great.
Yeah, it's just a little technique that would actually serve a lot of geeks well, because once you learn these things and build them all into your presentation, then you're moving more positively.
Okay, so what's the next pillar?
Okay, so the next protocol is participation. Far too often, a geek will give a presentation that's just talking at somebody. It's not actually interacting with the audience, because, as you know, we're human beings. We like doing things.
And the first thing that happens there is that people just zone out.
Exactly. And especially imagine if that total lack of participation is compounded by a fairly monotonous voice that doesn't really go up and down and just gives you the technical information rather like this across the whole 90 minutes of the presentation.
That's why I recommend puppies and kittens.
So participation, of course, participation can be as simple as, how many people have used FreeSwitch, hands in the air, that kind of thing. Or it can be, has anybody got a use case that they could tell us about that involved, I don't know, primary rate interfaces, or, whatever it is, draw people in. However, and there's a big however, Mike, you've got to work hard. And actually, and this is one of the massive keys here. This is a massive key moment. Let's just have a moment's silence for this massive key moment. There it is. You've got to have worked very, very hard to both establish and build and maintain rapport with your audience before you ask them to participate. Let me liken it to this. Have you ever watched a YouTube video on a very poor bandwidth connection, Mike?
Very much like the call we have right now, because I'm frozen.
Well, there you go. If you've not got a good broadband channel, if you've not got a good connection, then you're going to struggle getting the information up and down it. And so, as a great geek presenter, one of the things you want to do is create your communication channel and then make it as wide bandwidth as possible, and importantly, making it a two-way communication channel so that you can put your information down it, but you can read the information coming back from your audience. And you really need to work on doing that. The generic name is rapport. We need to establish and maintain rapport. But you could see this, if we were talking in technical terms, as the extent of your connection with the audience and your engagement with the audience. Because if you've worked hard to create and maintain that, then they're going to want to answer your questions. They're not going to be embarrassed about putting their hands up or saying anything. They're actually going to want to work with you. They're going to want to participate because you've made it an easy thing to do.
That's cool.
So participation, that is so important. And there's lots of different ways of participation. You can, for instance, you can arrange a demonstration and get people up and out of their seats involved in a demonstration. Or do you remember in the case of that dangerous demo, Mark Crane threw this thing out into the audience and everybody was able to move the thing about and get involved. People participated in it. They weren't having something done to them. They were involved in something that was going on. And so participation is an absolute key. And the book, in the chapter that deals with participation, not only gives the advantages of participation, but lists lots of different ways of engaging people in participation, so that when they walk away from the presentation, they won't feel that they had something done to them. They'll feel that they had something done with them or for them, that they participated in the event.
Well, and that's something that helps in all aspects of life. It's not just presentations.
But very, very much so. And in fact, yes, although I'm majoring on the area of presentation skills, I would say the general communication skills that you would learn by going through this will actually help you in so many other areas of life. And the confidence that you build as a good presenter would help you be confident in many other areas of life too.
That's interesting. That's interesting.
Should we do the last couple
Without any question. Very true.
should we do the last couple of protocols?
Yes, absolutely. Let's hear them.
Okay, so the last couple of protocols, the penultimate one is production, or the actual presentation itself. And this is where we will deal with nerves, actually getting involved and delivering the presentation yourself, and the fact that nerves can come up. We can analyse what fear really is. Have you ever heard this? Have you ever heard what fear really stands for, Mike?
No, what's this?
Fear, F-E-A-R, false evidence appearing real. In other words, you get all excited and all kind of mashed up inside about things that you think might happen that aren't really going to happen. And another way of looking at it is thinking about
So the end becomes the means, right? Is that the correct saying? The end justifies the means.
Yeah, I guess you could kind of spin things around that way. It's all about actually being real about what's likely to happen. When you step out on stage or at the front of a room to do a presentation, what's the worst things that can happen and what's the best things that can happen? The worst thing that can happen is as you walk out, you trip over, you fall on your face, you get a nosebleed, your presentation doesn't work, everybody starts pointing at you and booing. That's the worst thing that could happen. Is it likely to happen? No. No, it's not going to happen. What's the best thing that that could happen? You can walk out, the audience can be in the absolute palm of your hand for the whole presentation, and as you finish the presentation, after you've summarised, after people have asked their questions, you've summarised, and then you come in with the perfect ending. And I do describe in the book what the perfect ending to a presentation is, one that almost guarantees that people are going to give you a hearty round of applause. But even better this time, because this is the best thing that can happen, they all stand up. They honour you by standing up and go, that is absolutely the best thing I've ever. Is that likely to happen? Probably not. In other words, the absolute.
I don't think I've ever seen it at a telecom conference.
I know that is a big ask, but in other words, the absolute worst thing that could happen and the absolute best thing that could happen are unlikely to happen. What's likely to happen is somewhere in the middle, where people are willing you to do a good job. They want you to do a good job, because if you're a comfortable presenter, you're going to lead to a comfortable audience. If you're an uncomfortable presenter, you're going to actually push that uncomfort or that lack of comfort out into the audience, and they're going to feel a bit uneasy as well. And so in the book, we look at ways and techniques of feeling less nervous and more comfortable. It's not necessarily a case of getting rid of all the nerves. The phrase I would use, Mike, is if you are going to have some butterflies, let them fly in formation and help you out rather than be a difficulty to you.
That's a great way of looking at it, for sure.
And then the last protocol is post-event. So in other words, what do we do actually after the event? Yes, of course, we might pass around some evaluation sheets, or happy sheets, as some people call them. We might ask people what they thought at the time. However, what we need to keep in mind is that presentation or that learning is part of a bigger chain of events, especially if you have a sponsor. And once again, the sponsor is the person that asked you to do the presentation. So you want to go back to them afterwards, maybe a week or two, maybe a month after the presentation, and say, is what we were looking to get achieved, has that been achieved? Are your employees more effective in this particular area of their work now? Or are your salespeople selling more stuff? Or have you got less tech support calls than you used to have? In other words, evaluate the job that you've done, not just by the feelings at the very end of the training session or the presentation, but by the role it played in the wider world.
So what's really interesting is I've found is, especially in these types of conferences, people are afraid or intimidated to ask questions.
Yes.
And so what they typically end up doing is they'll do it later behind closed doors.
That is a classic. That's an absolute classic symptom of when a presenter has failed to open up the communication channel. Because if the presenter did that at the beginning, and using various tools and techniques that could be a little bit of self-deprecating humour, could be finding some common ground about the technology that everybody's involved in, and just making a lot of things. If they widen that communication channel, then people will feel free to put their hands up. But if they fail to do that, the presentation will finish. It'll have a very kind of low energy finish, but then the people that want to know the technical answers and things will go and seek that person out afterwards and ask them privately. Of course, that's not always the case. It may be that some people don't want to ask a question in the forum of the presentation because it might be commercially sensitive or some other reason. But generally speaking, a failure to get participation is a failure to engage the audience properly at the beginning of it.
That's interesting.
Just throwing it out there, Mike.
Okay, so the next pillar is.
No, that's it. We've covered the 7 now. The purpose, the planning.
Oh, we did all 7?
Yeah. Practicing, participation, production, post-event. I mean, you know, obviously there's a lot more detail we could go into each one of them. But when I come to ClueCon in Chicago between the 5th and 9th of August, which I'm very much looking forward to, the presentation I'll be doing is about why nerds aren't heard. And rather than kind of giving the protocols in the way I've given them just now, I'll actually flip it round and say, let's look at some of the reasons why nerds aren't heard and why they don't make the best job of presenting. And I'll address each one of those problems with a protocol to solve it.
And you know what? That's wonderful too, because really more than anything else, that helps the different community members become essentially not just better speakers, but better people in general.
I want nerds to earn more money. I want nerds to get better jobs. I want nerds to be more confident in setting out on their own company or their own career or whatever. I'm kind of at that point in life where, I've been very blessed in that I've been able to do some things that I really wanted to do over the years. And a big part of the reason is because my presentation skills were reasonably good. And that, you know, as you know, when you're running a race, to win it, you don't have to be like a mile in front of the other person or the other people. You just have to be, you know, a few seconds or a few inches in front of the other people. And that's what I found throughout my career at conferences, that by being a reasonably good presenter, I was kind of a bit more memorable than a lot of the presenters at a conference. And so I want to give that back now. I want to help other people achieve those things.
And just like when we started the call, I mean, I look forward to seeing you at every conference. You know, and it could be these concepts.
Very, very kind of you to say so. Very, very kind. Great. Well, that really kind of wraps it up. If people would like more information, they can go to letthegeekspeak.com. Now that page is not fully built yet, but you will notice in the bottom left-hand corner a button to click that says free report, or you can go straight to letthegeekspeak.com/free-report. And if you go there, you can download a free PDF that says why nerds aren't heard. It's 7 ways that geeks sabotage their own presentations, and it gives you some ideas of what to do about that. And also, you'll end up on my list so that I can tell you when the book is out and help you be a geek that speaks, a nerd that is heard, a propeller head that's going to propel ahead.
So you must tell me when the book's out, because that's definitely one I'm going to be reading.
Well, thank
and hopefully
you. So,
I'll be
thank you. I'm about halfway through it. I've got all the material mapped out because I've done, you know, what I suggest, and that's doing mind maps and stuff to actually organise it. So I've organised it all. I've just got to get on with it. But I really do hope to have it in my hand for ClueCon, so that I can bring some copies along, and maybe we can throw a few copies into the all-important ClueCon prize draw.
I'm sure we can, without any question. Okay,
Right.
well, thank you for coming in today. And it's always wonderful having you on. And I can't wait to see you in Chicago.
Looking forward to it. But we'll be meeting up in OpenSIP Summit ahead of that, won't we? And maybe Camellia World as well.
We will, and the best part is you can give me your unbiased opinion on my presentation.
I'll look forward to it, Mike.
Well, thank you for coming in today, and back to you, Ken.
All right. Thank you very much, Mr. David Duffett and Mr. Mike Malverdis. Before we wrap up today, we're going to go over and talk to Miss Madison Ream. She's got a few things she wants to talk to us about. Hey, Madison, how are you doing?
Just wanted to pop in and have a couple more questions for David, specifically about ClueCon this year. And we're so excited to have you here, David. We're so excited that you're going to be speaking. Actually, on our YouTube channel right now, on our live feed of this, we have a lot of people thanking you for all your great tips that you've given so far. I just wanted to ask you a couple of things. So this is, how many years have you been to ClueCon now, including this year?
I think this will be my 5th one, I think.
5 years. So in those 5 years, are there any specific talks that stand out to you that have been given at ClueCon?
Yeah, I'm always a big fan of a Fred Posner talk. I always look forward to a Fred talk. Fred, as you know, is a bit of an expert in all things free switch and Camellia especially. And he always brings a good sense of humour as well. Sense of humour is one of the things that Mike and I didn't really talk about, but it can be used very well in presentations. Sometimes people use it wrongly and it kind of goes a little bit awry, but Fred's one of those people that uses it really, really well. Got a very dry sense of humour, very geeky sense of humour. And I look forward to those. But I think one of the things that I really look forward to is the kind of family and community feel of a ClueCon. Yeah. You know, it's just always a very, very friendly and supportive environment.
Yeah, absolutely. And going on with the family environment, a lot of the times you think, well, I can't bring my kids to ClueCon, but you actually can, because we have things like the Voice Tail Boat Tour or the Flow Route sponsored dinner that family is welcome to come to as well, right? So that's a really good point to touch on.
Yeah, and in fact, just to prove that point, I've actually brought 2 of my children along to ClueCon. My boy Luke came a few years ago. I think he came in 2016. Luke came and he shredded the axe with Tony on one of the evenings. Yes, he did. Played a bit of guitar together. And then last year, my daughter Holly came with me. So I've been really blessed to bring a couple of them along over the years.
Yeah, it's been so wonderful just meeting you and meeting your family. And I actually now follow Luke on Instagram on his music page, right? Because he's got his band.
He's actually got a gig tonight. He's playing Sheffield in the UK tonight. And I wish I could be there, but it's a bit of a long way.
Yeah, well, wonderful. Well, we wish him good luck. And we are so looking forward to seeing you again, David. So that's all I have to ask you. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
All right, back to you, Ken.
All right, thank you very much, Miss Madison. So look, guys, don't forget, if you want to check out some of the Free Switch team, you want to meet them live in person, check out Camellia World. It's coming up very soon. OpenSIP Summit. You can actually, Mr. Mike Malverdis will be at both of those. And then later in August, come out and see us at ClueCon. You'll get to meet David. You'll get to meet.
I'm so looking forward to seeing you again, David. So that's all I have to.
You'll get to meet a whole bunch of different people that are there, from David Duffett, Anthony Minasali, Brian West, Mike Jarris, as David was mentioning, Fred Posner. You'll see guys from the various VoIP-related open source projects, and even some projects that you may not think are related there. So you definitely want to come out to do that. Go visit ClueCon.com for more information on that. Also, if you want to know who's coming up and visiting us on ClueCon Weekly, go check us out on all the social media sites, and you can find out more information there. We'll see you guys next week.
You've been watching ClueCon Weekly. Tune in every Wednesday at 12 p.m. Central. Keep up with the latest happenings by subscribing to our YouTube channel, follow us on Facebook and Twitter, or visit us at freeswitch.com.